dip to feed him. Is that right?
I think John.
Welcome to this sacred celebration for a dear, independent, and unique man, our beloved Jim Kerr. He was our husband, our father, our stepfather, our grandfather, our friend, our neighbor, our teacher, our love. Our hearts fill with compassion and gratitude as we remember all the ways he touched us, helped us, loved us. And now words adapted from E. E. Cummings. We give thanks for most this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirits of trees, and a true blue dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. Thank you for being here this evening. Now we're going to hear from Michael, a summary of Jim's life.
Thanks for everybody for coming, and the musicians. That was beautiful too. All right, it's a long life, so settle in. Jim's life is an American story. Strong roots in an immigrant background and the hard work ethic. Marriage and building a family, exploring new ideas of how to live and work, building community, sharing the joy of life with others. His roots come from Scotland and is an immigrant story going back as far as the War of Independence. His grandparents took the Oregon Trail and homesteaded to build a new life in Oregon. He was born in Grants Pass, Oregon in January of 1929 to Ruth and Jack Kerr. His parents later moved to Washington, where he was raised in a small town, Walla Walla, with his brother Tom. As a young boy, he picked cherries to earn enough money to buy firecrackers and delivered papers on his bicycle. He was president of his high school class and boxed at Stanford University to earn a letter. Yeah, he was not a man to mess with as a stepfather. So. He worked his way through college by being a campus fireman, and this isn't in there, but actually they used to call him Injun Joe, which is not the most PC thing, but apparently after Jim had a couple drinks, he would take off running and come back red-faced, so. Oh, yeah, well, these were different times. He washed dishes, and he lived in the firehouse, too. ROTC and graduation found him an Air Force captain, working to process soldiers going to fight in the Korean War. His relationship here with Eve Sutphin resulted in the birth of his first son, Thomas Sutphin Kerr. After the Air Force, he went on to work in his first civilian job as a teacher, vice principal and coach at a small high school in Pescadero, California. He married a fellow teacher, Henrietta Edwards, and built an adobe house with 15-pound bricks in Woodside, California. He and his wife had 5 children, John, David, Jamie, and Andy, and 1 girl, Joni. Disillusioned with conventional education After teaching for several years at Los Altos High School, he found a new way of teaching and learning with the Portola Institute, where he directed an innovative federal project, Kids Teaching Kids. He separated from Henrietta and lived on the land in a teepee in the hills above Palo Alto. In 1973, Jim took his new ideas of education to Eugene, Oregon, where he directed a teacher's center through the Eugene Public Schools, and where he met his future wife, Sue Robbins, from Madison, Wisconsin. The move to Madison in 1976 brought new children to his family, Sue's sons, Paul and Michael Cohen. As the children grew and married, his family extended to include 4 daughters-in-law, Rose KERR, Ann Byer, Monica Brun, Rositza Canova Cohen, and 1 son-in-law, Dan Duplantier, not to mention 8 grandchildren, Justine and Greg Duplantier, Matthew and Megan KERR, Adam and Dale KERR, and Sienna Popdonova and Lila Cohen. This July, the next generation, great-granddaughter Elena Munoz, who he saw just a few months before he died. Life in Madison brought new ways to reach out and work with people. Family enhancement, where Jim developed a facilitator training curriculum for social workers and led numerous fathers workshops and worked with positive youth development, leading community development workshops, and served as Director of Senior Services in Greene County. Retirement activities included Wheels for Winners, providing bicycles for disadvantaged youth, puppet shows for young children through RSVP, teaching Tai Chi to seniors in Verona, working with Madtown O's to elect Obama, and other politicians with similar visions, and driving the train in the zoo, where he would make sure all the kids joined in saying, "All aboard," and yelling as loud as they could in the tunnel. Jim brought laughter and joy to all those he came in contact with, and his bright blue eyes and easy smile brightened all our days. We will surely miss him, but we will carry his energy with us as we move through life. Jim was 88 years old.
Matthew, a little older, and Megan. And this is Joni's family, now a little older, Justine with her husband, and Greg's next to her, and Joni and baby. This is our newly married grandson and his wife.
The dead are with us, especially at this time of year, when the wind whispers in the treetops, when the fallen leaves rustle in the grass and odd creatures, both big and small, scurry in the night. This is, after all, the season of Halloween. Jim is with us in our hearts and minds, of course, and perhaps also in a physical sense. It's a spooky thought. My brother Michael tells me that the Bulgarians believe that the dead remain hovering among the living for 40 days after they pass from this life. The Inuit believed that the northern lights, which shriek silently like cold fire across the crystal skies of the Arctic, are the souls of the dead playing a late-night soccer match of sorts, when most of us reasonable folk on earth are snugly tucked in our beds. I don't know. I'm not a religious man, and we are not a religious family. I asked Jim a few weeks ago what he believed. Was he afraid of the eternal darkness of death? Did he look forward to death's embrace? Would he come back as a snake or a bird? No, he said, I just won't be. It'll just be over. I'll just be gone. I'll be no more. Jim, great-grandfather, grandpa, dad, husband, is done, as he always put it. But I keep asking myself, how can that be? And how can a man seemingly not ponder the eternal question of what happens to us when we die? Where do we go? What's on the menu? Is there frozen custard in the land of the dead? That's a thought that might have pleased Jim. Even in the twilight of his life, Jim remained a force of nature. In galactic terms, Jim was a supernova, an ongoing nuclear event. Also notoriously in those rare moments when he truly lost his temper, and banged loudly on bathroom doors or shattered adolescent smoking paraphernalia in dark basements. He was strong. Yes, Jim's light burned impossibly strong and bright. And even as his body deteriorated and his memory failed him, his blue eyes continued to flash with almost startling intensity. While my own biological father was more of a black hole than anything else, and my mother is like the very earth to me, Jim was pure energy, the biggest of stars in the night sky, generously spewing out energy like there was no tomorrow. In many ways, Jim was an enigma to me. It was almost as if we spoke different languages. We didn't share the same DNA. We came from very different backgrounds. How could the son of a black hole understand a star so bright that it eventually rips itself apart in a cataclysmic explosion that lights up the night sky on Earth many light years away? Even when he was depressed, he seemed bafflingly cheerful. He shunned the darkness that consumes so many of us in our hour of doubt and despair. He could be hysterically funny at the most improbable moments. And as he prepared to draw the curtain on his own life, Jim's sense of humor was mysteriously fully intact. And that took my breath away. Jim was a brave man in the end. Instead of raging against the darkness of night, however eternal, he simply continued to live his life, cracking jokes in a flurry of gallows humor that could leave you holding your ribs as you shook with laughter. Yes, he made us giggle hysterically about death. I admire that strength, even if I don't understand where it comes from. Is death a laughing matter? Jim seemed to think so. They say you can't escape this life alive. Jim might have said, why bother worrying about the inevitable? Besides, you'll be beyond caring when you're gone. Well, he's gone now. But I'd like to believe that Jim's light continues to shine out into the endless expanse of space. And some of that light reflects back to us here on Earth. I take solace in that thought.
All the stuff that used to drive me crazy in him, all the kind of the hippie speak and the weird, I hear where you're coming from and I really appreciate this and that, drove me up the wall as a teenager. Something shifted. I don't know at what point it happened, but I don't know. I guess I got a little bit older and he kind of mellowed. And there was some point when sitting across the table from each other, we really saw each other eye to eye, and he became more of a real father to me than my flesh and blood father. And one of the things that I appreciated about him was how he could really make my mother laugh too. I've never seen anyone who can just have her shaking like that at the table. One of the things he loved the Sufi stories. Every Thursday night we used to read Sufi stories and eat dates. Yeah, I'm going to read one from that book. A stream, from its source in far-off mountains, passing through every kind and description of countryside, at last reached the sands of the desert. Just as it had crossed every other barrier, the stream tried to cross this one, but it found that as fast as it ran into the sand, its waters disappeared. It was convinced.
And when he first came here, he tried to bring Sufi stories on Thursday, and he was shoving dates down our throats, and people weren't enthusiastic about Sufi stories, and really only now are we remembering them fondly, right? They were like, what does this mean? But I went. I was a regular figure there, and he and Sue were going to go somewhere, so they weren't going to be there. And so he asked me to continue doing Sufi stories on Thursdays. I was like, yes, I will do that, only for you. And so they were going to be gone for 2 weeks, and for 2 weeks nobody came. And of course nobody came, because the only thing holding Sufi stories together was Jim. Nobody's going to go and listen to Sufi stories if Jim is not going to be there, making them feel good about Sufi stories. As my wife said, we lost a cheerleader. We lost the very best cheerleader.
We had a wheelbarrow. It was a pretty nice wheelbarrow. It was red and shiny, and we used it to haul big things around in the backyard. And one summer, Jim asked to borrow the wheelbarrow, and we said, sure, we don't need it right now. And he borrowed it. And then several years later, we were hauling large bags of something around in the backyard. And Jim looked over the fence and went, gosh, I have a really nice wheelbarrow. You could borrow it if you wanted to.
And then lets it fall again.
Jim and Sue came to a couples enrichment group that my wife and I were part of. It must have been 18 years that we were meeting with the group. And that's mainly how I got to know Jim. Really, I couldn't tell you what kind of music he liked. But I could tell you how Jim and Sue fought.
Tell us.
And I could tell you how they resolved their fights. So in a way, I feel like I knew Jim very intimately. I helped dig Jim's grave. Then I baked Jim's last apple crisp, which actually was an apple soggy by the time it got through. And then I called him because there was something that I'd forgotten to tell him. And I reached him at his last meal at a restaurant with his family. And I said, Jim, I have some things to tell you. I have the 5 last things. I love you. I forgive you for abandoning us. Please forgive me for not being a better friend. And he said, oh, you've been a great friend. It's okay for you to go. I'll be all right. And then we buried him.
Remember me when I am gone away, gone far into that silent land, when you can no more hold me by the hand, nor I have turned to go, yet turning stay. Remember me when no more day to day you tell me of our future that you planned. Only remember me. You understand it will be late to counsel then or pray. Yet, if you should forget me for a while, and afterwards remember, do not grieve. For if the darkness and corruption leave a vestige of the thoughts that I once had, better by far that you should forget and smile than you should remember and be sad.
Jim's mantra was process. And I learned from Jim that lots of things that you think you can just do quickly, get them over with, even a simple thing like buying a lamp, is actually a process that can't be short-circuited. I recall an episode where Jim demonstrated the importance of process, and he demonstrated his skill in dealing with people. And I don't know if Mike would remember this, but about 40 years ago, when Mike and our daughter Naomi were in 3rd or 4th grade at Randall School, something happened, and I don't remember what it was, but it upset the kids and their parents a great deal. And Sue and Jim and Sally and I went to the principal, Merle Sweet, to have a chat with him and see what could be done about the situation. And what I remember was that we spoke to the principal. I think Jim did most of the speaking. And after he would say something, he would say to Merle Sweet, "Tell me, what is it that you heard me just say?" Which is a terrific thing, because often you say something and you think the person has heard it and they just haven't.
Dear friends, it was sweet when Jim and Sue moved in down the hall from me because I knew him many years ago. I'm sad that I can't be with you today and be together. I was introduced to Jim way back in the early 80s when I was a young adult. I was creating an individualized master's program combining multicultural awareness, conflict resolution, and organizational development. I needed to find local people who could advise and mentor me, and Jim took me on with his characteristic enthusiasm. He not only offered advice, He eagerly made space for me to co-lead workshops and trainings with him, pushing me forward even when I was nervous and afraid. And his generosity and confidence in me made it possible to keep going. He was a good mentor and a good friend.
Very shortly after they moved in directly over our unit. I'm sitting in our condo, and I hear this big kaboom. I said, you know what, it sounds like maybe they're moving a bookshelf and it fell over or something. I better go up and see what happened. And I went up, and there's Sue lying on the ground, and there's Jim smiling.
But the sands whispered, "We know, because we see it happen day after day, and because we, the sands, extend from the riverside all the way to the mountain. And that is why it is said that the way in which the stream of life is to continue on its journey is written in the sands."
This body I live in is not really mine, just a home I have borrowed. I'll return it sometime. Death does not haunt me, I never will die, 'cause I'm part of the earth and part of the sky. When my body lies empty, I'll find a new home. Give back to the earth my flesh and its bones. Return what was borrowed, but don't stop to cry, 'cause I'm part of the earth and part of the sky. And on some dark night when you start wondering why, look at the stars in the clear moonlight sky. We all move in circles, just something you'll learn. Death is not dying, it's just my turn to turn. And if you start wondering just where I might be, look at the flowers and the leaves on the trees. Look at the rivers and mountains and seas. That's where I am, and that's where I'll be. I'll be the thunder and the rain in the night. I'll be the sunrise and the first rays of light. I'll be the forest and the birds as they fly, 'cause I'm part of the earth and I'm part of the sky.
In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember Jim. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember him. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember him. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember him. In the rustling leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember him. When we have joys and we yearn to share, we remember him. So long as we live, Jim too shall live, for he is now a part of us as we remember him.
When Jim and I first met and first were together, for some reason we broke into song at all sorts of instances. Mostly they were old songs, and somehow they fit what was going on. But this song was the last thing I actually sang with Jim. He was talking about cider, I think, and I suddenly remembered this song, and I think it's fitting to sing together. So I need your help, and let's see. And you repeat the lines that I sing. The prettiest gal I ever saw, was sipping cider through a straw. The prettiest gal I ever saw was sipping cider through a straw. I says to her, what you doing that for? Just sipping cider through a straw. I says to her, what you doing that for? Just sipping cider through a straw. So cheek to cheek, and jaw to jaw, we both sip cider through a straw. And cheek to cheek and jaw to jaw, We both sip cider through a straw. And now I've got a mother-in-law, from sipping cider through a straw. And now I've got a mother-in-law, from sipping cider through a straw. And 49 kids, all call me Pa, from sipping cider through a straw. And 49 kids all call me Pa, from sipping cider through a straw. The moral of this story, dear, is never sip cider, just sip beer. The moral of this story, dear, never sip cider, just sip beer. And later there's lots of beer as well as wine.